Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump is signing 3 new executive orders at an AI summit in Washington. He also announces a bold AI action plan to sustain America's global AI dominance. What's in the plan and what DNI Tulsi Gabbard tells White House reporters about the 2016 election. Mari Otsu at the White House. Jeffrey Epstein's grand jury transcripts from the mid-2000s will not be unsealed, why a federal judge is denying the Justice Department's request. Brian Koberger, the confessed killer of 4 University of Idaho students, is sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms, what the victim's family member said at today's sentencing. Arlene Richards reports. Multiple international aid organizations warn of a food shortage in the Gaza Strip. This comes as hundreds of trucks carrying aid are inside the Gaza Strip, waiting to deliver the aid. Jason Perry with the details. Ukraine is dealing with the first anti-government protests since the start of the war. Ariane Pozdar has how President Volodymyr Zelensky is responding.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump vowing to stop adversaries like China from using AI to push values contrary to our own. He's signing new executive orders and unveiling a White House action plan to boost the American AI industry. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Mari Otsu. Good evening, Mari. What is the latest from the AI summit?
Good evening, Tiff. Yes, currently President Trump is speaking at the Winning the AI Race Summit here in Washington, just after his administration unveiled today a comprehensive AI action plan. Key features of this plan include targeting AI models with political bias and making it easier for companies to build data centers. President Trump declares that America must win the AI race. Take a listen.
I'm here today to declare that America is going to win it. We're going to work hard. We're going to win it. Because we will not allow any foreign nation to beat us. Our children will not live on a planet controlled by the algorithms of the adversaries advancing values and interests contrary to our own. And right now we're leading China very substantially in AI, very, very substantially. And
Press Secretary Leavitt said in her briefing earlier today that she does not think that the president supports federal agencies contracting with Elon Musk's AI company. And at the summit, Trump also touted the 3 new trade deals he made yesterday with the Philippines, Indonesia, and Japan. The president got Japan to commit to $550 billion of investments, negotiating up from originally a $400 billion deal to revitalize American industries. The U.S. will retain 90% of the profits from any investments made by this $550 billion investment, and Japan will now pay a 15% tariff versus the 25% they were expected to face starting August 1st. Tiff?
And Mari, there was a special guest at the White House press briefing today. What's the latest on that?
Yes, Tiff. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, today joined White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at the briefing. Gabbard outlined highlights from files that she declassified today, a House Intelligence Committee's majority staff report. Gabbard emphasized how these newly revealed documents showed a scheme to subvert President Trump's 2016 election victory and undermine the democratic will of the American people, calling it a, quote, gross politicization and manipulation of intelligence. Take a look.
November of 2016, they worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump and launching what would be a years-long coup against him and his administration. We're here today because the American people deserve the truth, they deserve accountability, and they deserve justice.
The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, urged the American people to look at the documents themselves to know the truth, saying that Americans deserve faith in the integrity of our democratic republic. Back to you, Tiff.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. And this just in, the Justice Department tonight says it's forming a strike force to investigate the evidence publicized by Gabbard. Attorney General Pam Bondi says they will, quote, leave no stone unturned to deliver. A federal judge in Florida today denied the Justice Department's request to unseal grand jury transcripts regarding convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The denial quickly comes after a request from the Trump administration to release the transcripts in an effort to dispel a storm of criticism from many MAGA supporters. The Florida judge said the Justice Department's concerns about public backlash were not an exception to the 11th Circuit's grand jury secrecy law. The ruling today was separate from a request for grand jury transcripts that the Justice Department has pending in the Southern District of New York, where Epstein was ultimately indicted. The Florida judge said that the Second Circuit has previously allowed for additional exceptions in the release of grand jury transcripts. Brian Kohberger, the confessed killer of 4 University of Idaho students, has been sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms in prison. Before he was sentenced, several family members emotionally spoke about the anguish they've suffered. NTD's Arlene Richards has more details.
For a long time, I could barely get out of bed, but one day I realized I have to live for them. They did not get the chance to keep living, but I do, and I will not take that for granted. So now every day I remind myself to live for them, and everything I do it with them in mind. I am still scared to go out in public, but I force myself to do things because I know that they would want me to keep living my life to the fullest.
After 2 hours of tearful statements from the families of slain University of Idaho students Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan, Idaho Judge Stephen Hippler, with emotion in his voice, sentenced Brian Kohberger to 4 consecutive life sentences with no opportunity for parole, plus an additional 10 years for burglary. Kohberger admits to unlawfully entering the college residence of Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Coronado, and Ethan Chapin in November 2022. He then brutally murdered these 4 students as they slept. Kohberger requested a plea deal 3 weeks ago to avoid the death penalty. Family members were both grief-stricken and angry.
You tried to break our community apart. You tried to plant fear. You tried to divide us. You failed. Instead, your actions have united everyone in their disgust for you.
He took them from me, my friends, my people who felt like my home. The people I looked up to and adored more than anyone. He took away my ability to trust the world around me. What he did shattered me in places I didn't know could break.
Kohberger showed no emotion during the family's statements. When given the opportunity to speak, he said he respectfully declined. According to the plea agreement, he waives all rights to appeal the sentencing. In addition to the prison time, Kohberger is ordered to pay $200,000 in fines and $20,000 to the families. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
In the Middle East, multiple international aid groups are warning of a food shortage in the Gaza Strip. This comes as almost 1,000 trucks carrying humanitarian aid are sitting inside the Gaza Strip waiting to deliver it. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
On Wednesday, residents in the Gaza Strip were seen carrying humanitarian aid, and a cloud of smoke was seen from what looks like a nearby explosion. Residents have been gathering aid from the new aid distribution centers in the Gaza Strip, run by the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation, or GHF. However, multiple international aid agencies, including the UN's World Food Program, or WFP, are warning of a hunger crisis in the Gaza Strip. And the World Food Program said they don't want people with weapons near their distribution points or convoys, and also said this.
We need to be able to reach people where they are. We need to be able to operate with all routes inside and outside entry points into Gaza.
And the UN has also said they weren't able to deliver aid because of Israeli access restrictions. However, the spokesman for the GHF, which said they have delivered 80 million meals so far in the Gaza Strip, had this to say.
If you believe the UN and the WFP and many in the international media, they are saying that they don't have access, that they aren't able to feed people in Gaza. That is not true. Behind me You can see UN trucks sitting here idly. Some are broken down and some are laden with food and aid left to spoil. This is not a problem of access, it's a problem of execution.
And he once again called on the UN and international aid organizations to work with the GHF to help get aid to the people of the Gaza Strip. Israel said that there are about 950 trucks carrying humanitarian aid that are inside the Gaza Strip waiting to be delivered, but that international aid organizations are no longer collecting the aid as much as they used to. And Israel said that collecting the aid is the main obstacle to maintaining a consistent flow of aid to the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, at the UN, the U.S. ambassador said this about the situation.
It is unfortunate that the UN continues to turn down the offers of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to collaborate and coordinate aid efforts.
And in another development, Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar was in Ukraine on Wednesday, where he met with President Zelensky. In a post on X, Sa'ar said they discussed many things and that he urged Zelensky to move toward designating Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is dealing with the first anti-government protests in his country since the start of the war. Meanwhile, U.S. senators are halting efforts to sanction Russia, leaving that decision to President Trump. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the Ukraine update.
Any decisions that are made with respect to sanctions, the president wants to reserve that authority and that right to himself.
As Russia continues the war in Ukraine, the White House says President Trump wants to make the call on whether to impose sanctions on the Kremlin. Senators had been working on the Sanctioning Russia Act, but they're now pulling back to allow Trump to take action.
But the president has always maintained, he's the commander-in-chief and the president for a reason, and he has been deeply involved in this conflict since the beginning.
9 days ago, President Trump gave Russia a 50-day deadline to stop the war in Ukraine. The administration says Trump wants to see Moscow making serious progress in the peace efforts by then. Meanwhile, in Turkey on Wednesday, Ukrainian and Russian officials met for the first direct talks in 7 weeks. Russia says the two sides agreed to swap more prisoners of war. Ukraine has been trying to arrange a meeting between President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russia's Vladimir Putin. But a Kremlin spokesperson said this after Wednesday's talks.
This meeting is not for discussing a deal, but for wrapping it up, signing it. There is no point in them meeting to discuss all of this all over again.
And in Ukraine, a new law spurred the largest public protests since the start of the war. On Monday, a Ukrainian security service arrested officials from 2 key anti-corruption agencies. The officials are alleged to have ties to Russia. Then on Tuesday, Ukraine's parliament voted to tighten restrictions on those 2 agencies. Shortly after, Zelensky signed the measure into law.
President signing it in a few hours, that's really unusual.
Some lawmakers in the European Union say Ukraine shouldn't tighten restrictions on anti-corruption agencies.
This is serious and it is worrying, and there are formal obligations for Ukraine in this process, what Ukraine committed themselves to do.
A protester in Ukraine suggested that the government is going against the will of the people by passing the law.
They can pass some amendments that nobody will notice. And even if people notice, they have not enough energy left to fight on 2 fronts.
Zelensky says the new law is needed to crack down on corruption and stop Russian influence. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Coming up, members of Congress dive into how the Chinese Communist Party is using economic coercion to stop countries from upholding democracy. The key takeaways from today's hearing, including how the free world is standing up against the Chinese regime. Countering China's malign operations against Taiwan, Sam Wong has the highlights from a congressional hearing uncovering the Chinese regime's efforts to reshape narratives on the island's de facto independence after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. This morning on Capitol Hill, lawmakers were joined by a former ambassador to Japan and a former Prime Minister of Australia to discuss how to dismantle the Chinese Communist Party's attempts to control the free world through economic coercion. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has has more.
When the CCP attacks any of our friends, partners, allies, that they understand that they're basically attacking all of us and that we band together to deal with their import bans, for instance, or whatever they do as a tool of economic coercion.
This hearing on Capitol Hill was meant to showcase how the CCP uses globalization as a trap, to use the words of the ranking member on the committee. The witnesses and lawmakers highlighted several instances of how the Chinese Communist Party has retaliated against democratic nations when they took actions that were unfavorable for the party. For example, like when Australia launched an investigation into the origins of COVID-19, China then responded with tariffs on the nation. Now, the lawmakers and witnesses say that the Chinese Communist Party's goal with tactics like this is to try to force the free world to bend to the will of the party. Listen.
Norway awarded a dissident the Nobel Peace Prize. China responded with salmon bans and frozen diplomacy. These weren't policy disputes, they were sovereignty violations. In each case, the message from Beijing was clear. We will control your behavior through your economy.
As far as how the U.S. is impacted by these coercive economic tactics, one lawmaker says that our reliance on China for critical rare earth minerals is our single greatest vulnerability. The ranking member even went so far as to try to visualize for the American people the number of everyday products that use these critical minerals to be produced.
Everyday items, including this toothbrush and even this drill. It's basically in everything you can possibly think of. These rare earth magnets power almost all items that involve motors in our daily lives. Unfortunately, the fact of the matter is, when China decides to cut off these rare earth elements, the motors stop and our economy comes screeching to a halt.
And when we talk about this topic, there's always the lingering question of whether or not the U.S. should move more aggressively to decouple from China. Lawmakers shared with NTD differing perspectives.
We have to diversify our risk. We have to, make sure that we have an indigenous supply chain in certain critical areas.
Do you think that the U.S. should take the lead in working to decouple with China?
Oh, look, many of those issues are going to be decided by markets anyway. And I think for many years, companies didn't price the risk. And, when Australia felt the fury of China, the cost of those risks became very apparent.
As far as the path forward, the witnesses and lawmakers say the goal is to find strength in numbers, some of them floating the idea of creating a NATO-like coalition. The U.S. already has a trilateral relationship with Japan and Australia right now. The goal is to strengthen that relationship as well as strengthen the supply chain so that these nations have a better chance at countering the CCP's economic coercion. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party is seeking to reshape global narratives on Taiwan's sovereignty, and the push starts here in the U.S. A hearing at the Congressional Executive Commission on China today unveiling the regime's malign operation against its dissidents on American soil. NTD's Sam Wong has the story.
We're a free country, and we should not have the gosh darn Chinese Communist Party trying to intimidate Americans on our soil.
A bipartisan congressional panel uncovering China's malign operations targeting Taiwan and its supporters in the U.S.
We've had previous testimony of transnational repression here in the United States, ranging from somebody walking up to a Chinese member of the diaspora and saying, "We know who you are, we know where you live," to direct threats of their family members back in China.
Members of Congress spotlighting one of the CCP's key influence campaigns known as the United Front Work Department. It's a state mechanism designed to co-opt and silence opposition outside of China, oftentimes by mobilizing a large network of overseas agents.
In a military context, the United Front system is operating on mission orders. It's not a question of whether it's legal or illegal. The party doesn't care about that. It cares about its objectives and creating this ability to leverage to push those forward.
The panel says that the CCP is working to reshape public opinions in the U.S., particularly on the Taiwan issue. The tactics include staging protests and using propaganda to fuel skepticism over the island's de facto independence.
So if you look at Chinese writings on the United Front, they explicitly call for these societal organizations and overseas Chinese community leaders and elites to play a role in promoting Beijing's interests, including over Taiwan.
Taiwan's independence has long been a flashpoint in the U.S.-China relations. Despite having no legitimate control over the democratic island, the CCP sees Taiwan as a renegade territory and has repeatedly pushed for a potential reunification by force if necessary. Lawmakers and experts warn that China's activities near Taiwan could have global implications.
Do you believe that the types of things that we're seeing them orchestrate in Asia today, particularly, election manipulation, could be executed here in the United States today?
It's already happened, and it will happen again in the future.
Sam Wang, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
The Chinese Communist Party is using the American legal system to wage lawfare against Americans and American companies. How can the U.S. defend against the CCP's attack on U.S. sovereignty? Tune into NTD for Capitol Report with Steve Lance at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for insights from Wisconsin Congressman Scott Fitzgerald. Coming up, hundreds of thousands of children are reported to be missing after crossing the U.S. border, according to lawmakers. What's being done to find them? Jason Blair has more from a hearing on Capitol Hill. Harvard and several other universities in the spotlight again. The State Department now investigating Harvard's visa program, probing whether it undermines U.S. national security. David Lamb with that story. And as President Trump unveils his AI action plan, how can the U.S. ensure its competitiveness as Communist China is also striving for dominance in the field? And how might Trump's plan tackle political bias in AI? Jessica Malugan from the Competitive Enterprise Institute joins us to discuss when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Trump administration today unveiled its AI action plan, a package of initiatives and policy recommendations meant to cement the U.S. as a global leader in artificial intelligence. Joining us now to discuss is Jessica Malugan. She's the director of the Center for Technology and Innovation at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you. First, what's your reaction to this AI action plan, especially the more hands-off approach from the government or bureaucratic guardrails here?
I think initially I kind of can't believe how far we've come in just a couple years. Under the Biden administration, the artificial intelligence executive order that came out was very much all about how to regulate it. It was sort of fear-based, and it really didn't talk about how to promote the technology or what all the possible benefits would be. And with today's order, we see sort of these three pillars that the administration is looking towards. One is, in fact, to promote artificial intelligence, both in the private sector and for government use. Then we see the administration trying to address the energy needs that AI will need to power all of this innovation. And then thirdly, they're trying to chart a path about making American AI the global choice. A lot of tech leaders point out that in not too long from now, the whole world will either be running on U.S. artificial intelligence or Chinese artificial intelligence. And I think this administration is very determined to make sure it's on U.S. artificial intelligence.
I want to get to the global aspects, but first, in terms of energy, the 28-page action plan notes, quote, American energy capacity has stagnated since the 1970s, while China has rapidly built out their grid. America's path to AI dominance depends on changing this troubling trend. Given how much energy AI needs, how do you see the U.S. tackling AI's energy consumption question?
Well, I think the report does go into some specifics around that, and that will mean expedited approval for things like new data centers and stepping around some of the environmental laws that have slowed energy projects down. But I think the larger picture here is that America is ready, I think, more generally to be pro-energy. I think all the energy options are now on the table, whether that's the big tech companies who are interested in investing in nuclear options and, of course, continued interest in the renewables. But also this administration has been very supportive of the oil and gas industry here in the U.S. And I think all of those things come together, again, in concert with the removal of a lot of red tape in terms of getting these projects up and running. And that's the plan we see here, because energy is going to just be key to all this AI. It takes a ton of power to run this stuff. And we probably can't even imagine how much as it goes forward.
Now, on that global scale, there's a big focus on China here. That's part of the argument for cutting the red tape to ensure America beats China in the AI race, given the concerns of communist-controlled AI dominating the world. Talk to us about the national security implications of this AI race.
So I think it's really important that the U.S. lead the way with this technology in terms of military superiority, in terms of economic growth and prominence, but also, just about embedding our democratic free speech values into what so many other countries around the world are going to adopt. It's really a great hedge for America to be the technology that all these other countries are using. We want those free speech values, those freedoms, both private property, economic, personal, religious. We want to promote that ideology around the world. And I think that the AI space is an opportunity to do that.
And on the flip side, what would the world look like if China beats the U.S. in the AI race? What would be the consequences of that?
I shudder to even think about it, but I think that we wouldn't be able to have the confidence that we would on AI products, that we're free to say what we want to say, to practice the religions that we want to do what we want to do. We'd be much more concerned about the inputs that were going into those models and the answers we were getting back out of them on the user end. And I really don't think, if given the chance, most of the world is interested in that kind of speech being controlled in Beijing. I think that much better to open this up for everyone to use as they see fit. And I think that's much more the U.S. model.
Now, another element here was the tackling ideologically biased or woke AI. What do you make of that? Who would be in charge of that? How would it be tackled?
Yeah, it was really vague in the order, and I think there's a reason for that. It's really unclear. That's a great ideal. I think we all understand wanting to aim for unbiased and objective approaches to all of this, and I think we'll probably see most of that. But when you get into kind of who decides what's biased and what's not, it's a very subjective question, and I think it'll sort of prove impossible for these companies to certify that their AI isn't woke or whatever. I think that it's good to sort of clear out a lot of that politicized language from this stuff, and I commend the administration for getting rid of some of that stuff that was associated with the Biden EO. But I think going forward, better to just sort of leave it open for each individual product and company to kind of bump snouts in the marketplace, so to speak, and people can sort out which products they trust and which products they align with. I'm not sure that a top-down government ban on bias, again, it's just a subjective thing. I think it would be very difficult to write into the letter of the law.
Big changes here for sure. Jessica Malugian, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Lawmakers look into statistics on missing children who had crossed the border unaccompanied and current efforts to locate them. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has highlights from the hearing on Capitol Hill.
The numbers in this subject are staggering. 448,000 UACs transferred to HHS, of which 31,000 sponsors have sponsor addresses that are blank.
UAC stands for Unaccompanied Alien Children. House lawmakers discuss data related to the large amount of these unaccompanied minors that crossed the border illegally during fiscal year 2019 to 2023 and what's currently being done to find them.
The Inspector General shared with my staff that almost 300,000 kids have unserved notices to appear for their court date. Of that number, 58,000 are aged 12 and under.
Of those, do we know where all those 448,000 unaccompanied children are?
As of the date of the report, we did not. Like I mentioned, ICE and HHS are now going out in tandem to go and identify where these children are located.
We're talking about children of God that have been waved into our country for 14 years and younger and improperly processed into virtually unvetted sponsors destined to be trafficked into some horror.
Congresswoman Latifah Simons says that there have been issues with federal holding centers for children.
I don't care what administration what they've had to suffer. Because for folks, if you've worked with trafficked children, if you've seen the detention facilities that they are warehoused in this country, both in the federal and county level, you would be shocked.
Subcommittee ranking member Summer Lee takes issue with how the current administration is handling deportations.
Over the last 6 months, President Trump, Kristi Noem, and Stephen Miller have unleashed a brutal, reckless, and lawless regime that targets innocent members of our communities, parents dropping off their kids at the school or attending church.
And earlier at a CPAC summit against human trafficking, White House border czar Tom Homan says that one of the administration's biggest priorities is combating the trafficking problem.
Our main focus right now is not just make sure that border is the most secure we ever had, which it is now, is to find the thousands and thousands of children that were trafficked in this country, released to unvetted sponsors.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The government is investigating universities, including the prestigious Harvard. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the probes are to help ensure national security. NTD's David Lamb has more.
On Wednesday, the State Department said it's looking into Harvard University's eligibility as a sponsor for the U.S. Exchange Visitor Program. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says it's to ensure that the programs don't compromise policy objectives or the national security interests of the United States. In May, the Trump administration cited anti-Semitism on university campuses as a reason for pausing new international student visas. Harvard condemns the investigation, saying that it violates the university's First Amendment rights. The university previously said it has made efforts to deal with anti-Semitic activity. The State Department's Exchange Visitor Program grants non-immigrant visas to individuals. These include students, teachers, physicians, and others to participate in the programs in the U.S. 349,000 of these visas were issued by the State Department in fiscal year 2023. At the same time, 5 other universities are facing investigations over alleged national origin discrimination. The Department of Education is probing whether these universities offered scholarships only for DACA students. DACA students are those in the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, who came to the U.S. as children. The government says these exclusive scholarships could violate the Civil Rights Act of 1964 for giving funding based on someone's national origin. These investigations come after the Trump administration promised to focus on America First educational policies. David Lamb, NTD News.
Coming up, a doctor accused of supplying ketamine to Mathieu Perry has pleaded guilty. This comes nearly 2 years after the Friends star's death in October 2023. California's Attorney General is pushing for state control of LA County's juvenile halls. The move follows years of reported safety and staffing issues. Christina Corona reports from Los Angeles. And in Olympic news, Team USA makes a bold decision regarding transgender athletes. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Dr. Salvador Plasencia, one of the doctors accused of supplying ketamine to actor Mathieu Perry, has pleaded guilty. He was charged with 4 counts of distributing the deadly drug. Plasencia reached a plea deal last month, and in exchange, prosecutors dropped 3 additional charges. He faces up to 10 years in federal prison for each count. His sentencing is scheduled for December 3rd. According to his attorneys, Plasencia is currently free on bond and plans to surrender his medical license within 6 weeks. Authorities say Perry was sold dozens of ketamine vials, including in one deal for $50,000 in cash. The Friends star was found dead in his hot tub in October 2023 from ketamine's effects and drowning. Nearly 9 months later, 5 people were arrested and charged in connection with his death. California Attorney General Rob Bonta is asking a judge to put several Southern California juvenile halls into receivership. He says LA County has repeatedly ignored court orders aimed at fixing unsafe and illegal conditions. NTD's Christina Corona has the details.
California Attorney General Rob Bonta said Wednesday that he plans to ask a judge to let the state take control of LA County's juvenile halls. He pointed to ongoing problems at the Los Padrinos facility in Downey, including youth fights and drug overdoses. Bonta called the situation a system failure that put lives at risk. He's asking the court to appoint a receiver to manage the troubled facilities after years of failed reforms and continued safety issues. Bonta says the county has ignored court orders since 2021 and remains out of compliance with 75% of them. This receiver would manage budgets, staffing, and daily operations at the Los Padrinos and Barry J. Nidar facilities. The facilities have faced repeated criticism, including criminal charges against officers for staging youth fights and a contractor caught smuggling Xanax. In March, 30 probation officers were charged for allegedly staging so-called gladiator fights between youths while they watched. However, the probation department's labor union blamed the LA County Board of Supervisors, saying the crisis stems from ignored warnings, hiring freezes, and outsourcing public safety. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on today, but let's start in Olympic news as the U.S. Olympic Committee has announced an effective ban on transgender athletes in women's sports. What was their reasoning?
Yeah, they said they had an obligation to comply with President Trump's executive order. Now, that executive order was signed back in February, appropriately titled "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports," clearly aiming for fairness in women's competition. Now, that order threatened to rescind all funds from organizations that did not comply. And we've already seen the NCAA change their policies as well here. Now, this all might end up being actually a moot issue, though. The IOC, under new President Kirsty Coventry, is going to be exploring this issue, and she's already talked about protecting the female category. And she's also expressed a want to make this uniform across all sports. Now, currently, each sport is dictated by its own sport's world governing bodies. So we had the Olympics, you had different sports allowing different rules regarding transgender athletes. But of course, whatever they do decide, the U.S. has already decided no transgender athletes in women's sports on Team USA.
Lots of changes there. Shifting gears to tennis, though. 45-year-old Venus Williams became the second oldest woman to win a singles tour-level match last night at the DC Open.
Yeah, very impressive. And her opponent was not some, unknown qualifier here. She beat 35th-ranked Peyton Stearns 6-3, 6-4, became the oldest woman to win on the tour since Martina Navratilova, age 47, did some 2 decades ago at Wimbledon. Now, interestingly, Stearns just 23 years old. Williams had already won 4 major titles before she was even born. Now, Williams will go on to win 7, and counting here, 5 Wimbledons and 2 U.S. Open titles. But her last major championship was in 2008. Her last match overall was actually March of 2024. Now, she had been out after having surgery to remove uterine fibroids. So Williams will next face 24th-ranked Magdalena Freck. That will be tomorrow at noon, and I will be watching too, as long as I can find it on TV somewhere. Hopefully, DC Open. So.
All right, well, fingers crossed for you there. Looking at NFL news, though, New Orleans safety Tyrann Mathieu announced his retirement yesterday after 12 years in the league.
Yeah, right on the eve of training camp, which actually just started today. Now, Mathieu, 3-time All-Pro selection, played a dozen seasons in the league for 4 different teams. Probably, though, his best years were those 3 with the Kansas City Chiefs. He made 2 Pro Bowls, was twice an All-Pro selection there, also helped them win Super Bowl 54 over San Francisco. Now, Mathieu posted this announcement on social media saying in part, quote, "To every coach who believed in me, every teammate who battled beside me, and every fan who showed up, cheered, and rode with me through the highs and lows, thank you. You gave me strength when I needed it most, and your love carried me farther than I ever imagined. I hope I made you proud out there. This isn't goodbye, it's the next chapter." So we wish him well in the next chapter there.
I mean, a very sweet message.
A very sweet message, yeah. Plus, he was a Chief.
There we go. Moving to baseball news, though, Justin Verlander picked up his first win of the season this afternoon as the Giants beat the Braves. This ended a bit of a drought for Verlander.
Yeah, this was his 17th start of the season. He was 0-8 through the first 16. That was the longest winless stretch by a Giants pitcher in a single season in franchise history. Though I'll grant he has not gotten much run support, just 26 runs scored by his offense in those 16 starts. Now, it's kind of odd to see this, though, from Verlander. This is a 3-time Cy Young winner. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's also 42 years old, though. Also in this game, though, Rafael Devers, the new Giant, came over from Boston not too long ago, homered twice as the Giants won 9-4 here. Now, elsewhere this afternoon, Shohei Ohtani homered again. This is his 5th straight game with a home run. That ties a franchise record, and that's just 3 behind the all-time Major League Baseball record. He's got 37 home runs this season, second only to Cal Raleigh. So that's just 2 of the 10 games that were on this afternoon. Tonight, we've got 5 more, including a very good pitching matchup in Toronto. The New York Yankees will trot out starting pitcher Max Fried, who has 11 wins this year. That is second most in baseball. Toronto, meanwhile, counters with Chris Bassett, who's got 10 wins. That game is on at 7:05 Eastern time tonight. Oh, and the Royals won this afternoon, so good news all around.
You'll
today.
be happy, and we have to let you get to that game.
Yeah, I know. It's starting very soon, so
Exactly.
I'm going to run out while you finish up here, all right?
All right, well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.